Ooh, happy Halloween. Hello? Welcome to Max's Theater. I'm Max, your host, I guess, and welcome to Spooky Month. Ooh. As you can see, I have my decorations here. I'm very excited. This is one of my favorite holidays, and I love it because I like watching all the movies that come with it, and one of my favorite movies to watch around this season is The Evil Dead, and its two sequels, Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness. And so that's what we're talking about today. I watch this trilogy every Halloween season. I just watched them again like 2 days ago, and I usually watch them back to back, so like 1, 2, 3. And I thought it would be fun maybe to sit down and talk to the camera here about why they're good to watch, and they're good movies, and I like them. So that's what we're doing. So the first one that we're talking about is The Evil Dead. This movie came out in 1981, directed by Sam Raimi, starring the man himself, Bruce Campbell, as Ash, who is the protagonist of the film, and the coolest character in movie history, maybe? I don't know. The whole series is kind of known for its kind of campy, funny hilarity, but the first movie starts out not really like that at all. It's kind of presented as a straightforward horror, and there is those campy elements that the Sam Raimi brings into the film, but for the most part it's pretty straightforward horror, and yet it's actually my personal favorite of the entire trilogy, and I'll get into why in a second. First, I want to talk a little bit about the background of the movie, how it got made. So, Raimi and Campbell were friends, and many of the people who worked on this movie were already friends when it was made, and they actually started by producing this film called Within the Woods.
You got anything, Bruce? What will I take with you?
And it was shot for under $2,000, and Raimi and Campbell and the other producers would go around and show the movie to a bunch of people and say, hey, can you give us more money so we can make this on a larger scale? And it led to a lot of begging, and they would have to go and please give us money to make this movie that at the time they were calling Book of the Dead, which I don't really like as much. I think The Evil Dead is a good title, and I'm glad they went with it at the end of the day. So they got enough money. They were hoping for about $100,000, and they kind of undershot. They only got about $90,000 from like family and friends and whoever would listen, whoever could give them money. And they finally earned this, and they went out of the woods. They went to a cabin, and they made the movie. It was a notoriously pretty difficult shoot. I mean, you got a bunch of relative amateurs making this movie, and there was like a lot of injuries on set and problems with the makeup, like the contact lenses that they use for the white eyes in the movie were like very thick. I think Bruce Campbell called them like eye Tupperware or something. Like they were very difficult, and you would have to take them off like every 15 minutes. Otherwise, like there would be no moisture in your eyes, and you can't have that. One of the things I really love about the movie is this kind of portrait of a bunch of friends going into the woods after they've gathered all this money so that they can make the movie that they are kind of dreaming of. And it's exciting that we get to see the result of all of that on screen all these years later because of how well this movie has been remembered. And that's thanks in part to the distribution of the film, which is almost like a series of miracles, is kind of a good way to describe it, that all work together to make this movie come to life. So Raimi was editing this movie with the help of Edna Paul, whose assistant at the time was Joel Coen from the Coen brothers. So that's kind of the first almost miracle here, because what ended up happening is that Coen would get inspired by Raimi and by his idea of making that like short $2,000 kind of concept movie, and he'd go on to make his first film, Blood Simple, and then they would also become friends. So you got the Coen brothers kind of getting started from this movie too, which is exciting. You also have Raimi going and showing this film to everyone to try and get it distributed. He was like, alright, we need to get this out there. So the person they showed it to that really latched onto it was like the co-founder of the Cannes Film Festival, distributor of Night of the Living Dead, named Irvin Shapiro. And he liked the film and saw that some money could be made from it, maybe wasn't expecting it to be as huge as it ended up being, and ended up showing it out of competition at Cannes, where Stephen King saw the movie and really liked it. And it's probably thanks to Stephen King that we have this movie here today, because his attention, him bringing attention to the movie, kind of elevated it to another status, and it would have probably been overlooked by critics if he had not stepped in and said, there is something of worth here, something I haven't seen before. And he's totally right, because this movie is so much different from all the movies that came before that. You look at the movies coming out right before this time, in the 70s. They're nothing like this. I guess the closest thing at the time that you have is stuff like Tobe Hooper making Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is, small scale group of college kids kind of go out and get killed. And I think the big difference there is the vibe is very different. In Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's like this gritty, almost rusty kind of movie, whereas in The Evil Dead, it's not so much rusty as it is kind of dark and foggy and fun in a way, which is kind of weird to say, but it makes sense. Oh, my foot's numb. I was sitting on it. Okay. Back to the video. Well, the movie eventually did get distributed, and it made a good amount of money, more than you would expect for this kind of movie. This shot on such, a low budget, basically with friends in the woods. But it wasn't like a breakout hit or anything. Where it really made its money, where it really made an impact, was home video. So it got released on VHS, and a bunch of people were watching it. It was X-rated, so kind of like, ooh. I don't really want to talk anymore about the distribution or production of this movie. I just want to kind of get into it, though, because what I really love, as much as I do love that idea of friends going off into the woods, and that kind of makes the whole thing, this is a really exciting movie in its own right. The use of Dutch angles is obviously iconic and would go on to kind of define Raimi's style, which he did really figure out while working on this movie, which is super cool. The use of the forest, the woods, in this movie is fantastic. I mean, the whole time, there's this feeling that there's something dark in there, just beyond reach, which is kind of creepy and also kind of cool, because it has this feeling of the cabin itself almost being as isolated as the characters in it feel. The movie also has some really great deaths, and visual effects, obviously, are fantastic. I love that shot where the pencil goes through the ankle of Linda. that kind of opening shot of the camera over the water, which is filled with like leaves. I love leaves in Halloween movies. That's such a weird thing to kind of pick on, but I think that I really associate that holiday, especially like trick-or-treating, with walking around stepping over crunchy or wet kind of orange leaves on the ground. So when a Halloween movie has that, that also kind of lends to the atmosphere of the movie. And I realize that's kind of a weird tangent to go off of, but it's something I really think is an easy way to make your film a lot more in the spirit of Halloween that a lot of movies like weirdly don't do. But I don't know, maybe that's just because they're set in California where everything is shot. I don't know. So the plot of the film is kind of simple and iconic. I mean, a group of friends go to a cabin and they find this book written in blood in the cellar, and then they read the words. Some spirit in the forest comes to life and starts to attack them. That's the plot of the movie. It's simple, and it would obviously go on to inspire later movies. I mean, Cabin in the Woods was pretty much marketed almost as a remake of the movie, and obviously became something a little more than that. And this movie actually did have a remake, but I don't think I'm going to talk about that. What I will say is that it is pretty good. I want to talk about a little bit. I want to talk about a little. Oh my god! I want to talk a little bit about the characters in the movie. I think they're super cool. I don't know, in a way. They're not the same kind of caliber of characters as you get in Evil Dead 2 and even Army of Darkness, but I think there's something to that realism of them in a way. They feel kind of like real college students going out into a cabin because, I mean, they were. And I think that really lends something to the movie as well, but obviously the breakout here is Bruce Campbell as Ash, who, while he doesn't hit his full potential here, which he will in the later movies, and he doesn't have his most iconic lines, there's definitely a charisma to his character that you get right away. Even though the movie, I don't think, immediately makes its protagonist kind of known. I mean, you're kind of on the edge about who it's going to be until about halfway through when it's like, okay, it's Ash. Kind of almost reminiscent of Alien, which had come out like 2 years earlier, has that same thing with Ripley. But I think Ash is a really great character, and I want to talk about him more, but there's not as much of his character present here as will be in the other two movies. So let's just get right into them, I guess. Evil Dead 2. Evil Dead 2, also known as Evil Dead 2 Dead by Dawn. Ooh. I'm not going to talk as much about the production or distribution of this movie because it's not as interesting to me. I mean, I'm sure there are some things that are interesting, but the scale of the Evil Dead's one's production is what makes it really an interesting thing to me. Evil Dead 2 is interesting for an entirely different reason, in the way that it takes kind of its source material, the thing that it's a sequel to, and remakes it in the first 5 minutes, completely redoes it. I mean, it gets rid of 3 or 4 of the characters from the first movie and just says, no, this was Ash and his girlfriend, who's played by a different actress, and they went out into the woods, and that's it. And they were, like, breaking into the house, too. So it's interesting because it's called Evil Dead 2, but it is almost a remake and then a sequel, which has been touched on a million times by everyone else. It's just a cool thing that you don't really see done anymore, and I wanted to talk about it. So Ash in this movie is a completely different character. I mean, really he is. He's a lot more outwardly charismatic, macho, perhaps. And he's also maybe a little bit more insane. I mean, that iconic scene where him and the lamp and the deer head are laughing in the cabin is clearly showing that he has changed a lot, both from the first movie and even from the beginning of the movie to like 20 minutes in when that scene takes place. And for those first 20-25 minutes, it really is just Ash in this cabin by himself. And I think if that was the whole movie, it wouldn't work as well. Which is how I'm going to segue into the introduction of our other characters. So the other characters are this redneck couple, Bobby Joe and the other redneck guy, and 2 researchers. One is the daughter of the people who owned the cabin, and the other is like his assistant professor. And they're just getting back from a castle far away where they found missing pages of the Book of the Dead, which they, could use to stop the spirit. My foot is still very numb. It is, like, almost painfully numb, I will be honest. Not comfortably. Obviously, this movie is a lot campier and has more iconic lines than the first movie. Groovy and swallow this.
Hey, I'll swallow your soul! I'll swallow your soul! I'll swallow your soul!
Swallow this.
Bruce Campbell's awesome in this movie. I'm not going to deny that. Raimi kind of continues to develop his style here. A lot of the Dutch angles and stuff come back with a fury. I mean, there's extensive use of those long kind of tracking shots that feel like something is kind of chasing you, or chasing the characters, which is obviously iconic to this franchise as well, and also a super cool effect which gets replicated in every single student horror film. So, Evil Dead 2 is obviously fantastic, and it's been talked about to death, and you should watch it. Okay? Just go watch it. It's fantastic. And the next movie that I'm going to talk about is about on the same level. Army of Darkness was released a while after. And it kind of, I think, has this feeling of a movie that shouldn't exist. It feels like one of those movies like Jodorowsky's Dune or Kubrick's Napoleon that you hear about. Like, did you know that there was supposed to be a third Evil Dead movie that would be set in medieval times? And what's crazy about it is that it's real. It's sitting right here. It's great. Ash in Army of Darkness is completely come into his own as probably the coolest character in cinematic history. He has the most cool lines to say, and probably does the most ass kicking in this one out of all of them. And this movie's also even campier than Evil Dead 2, even sillier, to the point where there are sequences that are just outright comedic. They have completely abandoned the kind of down-to-earth horror of the first movie, and instead, this movie is basically straightforward horror comedy, even more so than Evil Dead 2.
I am Henry the Red, Duke of Shale, Lord of the Northlands and leader of its peoples.
Well, hello, Mr. Fancy Pants. I got news for you, pal. You ain't leading but two things right now. Jack and shit. And Jack left town.
I mean, there's these, at one point, tiny ashes that are running around and jumping into his mouth and stuff like that. And he's also developed in an interesting sort of way, because he has a character arc. For the first time in any of these movies, he has a character arc where he learns to kind of own up to himself and become more heroic in a way that he kind of stays on a flat plane during Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 and is elevated as a character really in all aspects in this movie, I think. There are 3 different cuts of this movie, and I've only seen 2. And the one that I prefer is theatrical, because the ending, 1 is canonical to the TV show, which I have only seen the pilot episode of. Oops. And 2 is also, I think, just a lot more fun.
Lady, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store.
Who the hell are you?
Name's Ash. Housewares.
The shootout in the S-Mart, Shop S-Mart, The shootout is very fun, and I think it ends on a good note for the trilogy, and it makes it kind of this whole cohesive kind of project, 10, 15 years in the making. I'd have to say this movie probably has my favorite joke, my favorite visual gag of the entire trilogy, and it's just the scene right after the iconic, "This is my boomstick," where he's talking about it and kind of marketing it to them and pointing it at the crowd, and at first they're kind of fearful of it and standing back, and then as he begins to describe it and talks about the finish and where you can buy it, and they're all kind of admiring it as he turns it towards them, it gets me every time. I love that gag.
It's a 12-gauge double-barreled Remington. S-Mart's top of the line. You can find this in the sporting goods department. That's right, this sweet baby was made in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Retails for about $109.95. It's got a walnut stock, cobalt blue steel, and a hair trigger. That's right, shop smart. Shop S-Mart.
I think this movie also benefits from the setting change. I mean, Evil Dead 1 and 2 are set in literally the same cabin. And the differences in it are more character and effects wise and obviously tone. But this movie I think really benefits from moving to a different location and a different time. I think the idea of a medieval times placing this character who we've seen in this one setting into a different setting is good and cool. And I think if there was a third movie set in that cabin with the same characters, I'd probably go insane. So I'm glad that they kind of moved to a different location, because I don't think it would have been able to handle 3 movies as well in that one space. So that's the Evil Dead trilogy. Watch them all back to back. They're very short. I think the longest one is like 86 minutes. So really like nothing. And they're perfect for your Halloween marathon. So just go watch them. They're super fun, and you can be part of the cool club who likes the Evil Dead trilogy and thinks that it's the best Sam Raimi thing. It is. All 3 are the best Sam Raimi things. I love Spider-Man. Evil Dead's a little better. So that's my thoughts. Let me know what you think. This is my first time doing one of these, so what could I have done better? I guess comment below. Throw me a like. I don't know what. You don't have to. I don't care that much. All right, bye. Happy Halloween.